Hello and welcome to this QTheme tutorial. In this video, we'll be going through the grid options and highlighting the main function of each one. To find the QTheme settings, ensure the Kirki plugin is enabled. Next, from the WordPress admin menu, under the Appearance menu item, click the Customize link to navigate to the WordPress customizer. From there, open up the grid section. On the top of this section, you will see a switch for desktop and mobile views. This allows you to switch between viewports and build a separate grid for your mobile devices. We'll be talking some more about the mobile grid later on in this video. Staying in the desktop view, below the desktop and mobile switch, you'll find the presets control. Clicking on one of the preset layouts changes the grid and related control values to mirror your selection. You can select a preset that is close to what you want to build and then fine-tune it to your liking, or you can skip the preset selection altogether and start building your own grid. Next, we have the grid control, essentially the heart of the QTheme. The grid control allows you to build your site's layout and define its properties. On the top of the grid control, you'll see buttons to add or remove columns and rows. You can add as many as your layout requires and will be placing our grid parts in the areas created. You can define the width of each column by entering a valid CSS value on the top of each column, and you can also define the height of each row by entering a CSS value on the right. Using Auto, we let the browser auto-resize these to fit. The minimum that your main grid can contain is the header, content, and footer. That is why these three parts cannot be removed from your grid. If you hover any other grid part, you will see a trash button. Clicking on that button will remove the grid part and the space it was occupying will become available. Clicking on an empty area in your grid will reveal a drop-down menu where you can select a grid part to add. You can also click and drag multiple empty areas to define the space your new grid part will occupy. Please note that grid parts can only be added once in your grid, so for example, there can only be one header on your site. That's why in the drop-down menu where you can select the grid part you want to add, any items that have already been added to your grid are not selectable. To resize or move a grid part, hover it and click on the grid button. You can then click on an area where you want to move that grid part or click and drag the areas you want it to occupy. To edit advanced options for a specific grid part, you can hover it and click on its settings button. This will take you to a section where you can edit options for that grid part, and each one of them has options depending on its use. To add a gap between your grid parts, you can use the grid gap control. Entering a single value in this setting will apply the same gap both horizontally and vertically between grid parts. If you want to have different gaps horizontally and vertically, you can enter two values separated by a space. The first value will be the vertical gap, while the second value will be the horizontal gap. If you want to create a boxed layout, you can use the grid container max width setting. Next, you can edit the background color and image. This will be visible if you are using a boxed layout or if using a grid gap. Switching to the mobile grid, the first thing you'll see is the mobile breakpoint field. This breakpoint is the minimum width required before users start seeing the desktop grid. Any device with a screen size smaller than the breakpoint will automatically get the mobile grid. Then you can choose if you want to use a default grid for smaller screens or if you want to build your own custom grid. The default option will check what grid parts you have in your desktop grid. It will reorder them to prioritize your content and then render them in a single column layout. First, it adds the header, then the content, any widget areas or other grid parts that you may have added, and finally the footer. In most cases, you will not need to change this setting, but in some cases, you may want to do something custom for your mobile visitors, usually simplifying the view even further by removing non-essential grid parts. Though you can edit your mobile grid and customize it to your liking, the options for individual grid parts are global. That's why when hovering a grid part in your mobile grid, you will not see any buttons to edit the options for individual grid parts. Lastly, to make sure any changes you made are published, be sure to click on the Publish button located at the top of your Customizer panel. This concludes our tutorial about the QTheme grid settings. If you have any questions or need assistance, please create a ticket and our team will gladly answer your questions and provide any assistance required.